All right, folks, for those of you who have already logged in to our Real Talk about Millennial Homeownership webinar, we appreciate that. And we're just going to wait a couple of minutes to allow the rest of our attendees to log in. So we'll get started in about 2 minutes. I'm watching those logins. Everyone's getting logged in right now, so we'll continue to wait just another moment. So if you just logged in, we're going to give a couple more minutes to allow everyone to log in.
We should have some snazzy music.
I actually intended to have snazzy music, but
Matt, you should have brought your guitar.
I know.
Play
I
us
have
a little.
one in here.
Yeah.
Brandon, did you just take a drink?
I did. Was it really loud?
Your ice cubes. Sounds like a cold drink.
Yes.
this is kind of like watching popcorn pop. You know, when you have it on the stove for a few minutes and then you hear and you get to wait for it to slow down. So as soon as I see the login slow down in just a moment, we're going to go ahead and get started so nobody misses any of it.
Up to 47.
All right, so let's get started. So thank you all for attending the Real Talk about Millennial Homeownership this evening. My name is Daniel Jacobs. I'm the Managing Director here at True Loan Mortgage. So normally we have these events at a brewery. So this is our COVID edition. It's virtual. We've all learned how to use Zoom and gotten used to this new normal. But just because we're virtual doesn't mean we shouldn't still have fun and learn. So if you want to, just go grab a beer or appetizer or whatever you want to do so you can really enjoy learning. And we've got gift cards ready for each and every one of you who follow up with a pre-approval. We'll talk about that in a little while for a $50 gift card to Legion Brewing. Our last event that we had scheduled with COVID, we canceled. So we want to make sure to continue to support our local businesses for whenever you're comfortable going back and enjoying a beer among other people. So listen, today our event is going to be interactive, so please don't be shy. And I know a lot of us have gotten used to using Zoom, but there's a few features with the webinar versions that I want to acquaint you with if you're not already used to it. So just take a look right now and you'll see there are a couple of features in the little toolbar. Now, depending on what browser you're on or what kind of computer or phone or whatever, that toolbar is in a different place. So just take a moment and find it. And you're going to see a couple of things. One, you're going to see something that says raise hand. This is not in the normal meetings feature. This is in the webinar feature because everyone on here other than the presenters are on mute. So this raise hand feature will allow you to be really, truly interactive as we go along and we're talking about things. You can click that button. We're going to monitor that. We then will unmute you and then you can speak and ask your question live. If you don't want to raise your hand, you can type your questions in. There are two places. There's the chat feature, and then there's the question and answer feature. It doesn't matter. You can put it in either one. We're going to look for both. And as we go along, we're going to stop and make sure to look at the questions that you're asking. Ultimately, this event is for you. It's for you to get the information that you want. And we encourage you to be very, very interactive. Normally, when we're at the brewery, when we're holding a beer and an appetizer, everyone's asking questions and it's a very interactive event. So please don't be shy. In fact, right now, if you want, just find that little chat feature, go type hi in it, just so you get used to it. If you're not used to it, go type hi, okay? And then we're gonna get started. So first, I'd like to introduce our panel. First, we've got two of Charlotte's best realtors, okay? We have Tiffany White and Megan Reynolds. They're both from the Andy Bovender team of Allen Tate. Like I said, the top team in the city, and they're fantastic to work with. You'll see why as we move along through this session. We also have Josh Lipek. He is with the Costner Law Firm. And Josh and his team do an amazing job with helping our clients through the process and through the closing process. We'll talk about the different people's roles and such as we go along, and he's on our panel this evening. Also from Trullo Mortgage, my two business partners, Brenda Jarvis and Matt Wise. So we've got just an all-star team tonight. You want to ask them all the questions you have as we go along and learn as much as you want through the event. Normally, when we have these at the brewery, we hand out two books. One is a book that has just a sort of a step-by-step guide to home buying. It's really good because it's got little things you can fill out, like what's important to me, so you can work with your realtor about really honing in on what you're looking for. It talks about the various steps. It answers a lot of questions. Some of the questions we're going to go over today, and then some other things that we don't necessarily cover, are in that book. It's a great buying guide. And then the separate one that looks like the brewery is on it, you can see that cover. That has a lot of really helpful articles. It also has contact information for all the people on today's panel, and a lot of really salient articles that include things like when's the right time for me to buy a home, how to deal with student debt when buying a home. We even have an updated article in there on buying a home during the COVID crisis. So we're going to send you a link after this event. It'll go out around 7:30. There's a link for you to download those two books. And you can also reply to that email. If you want the hard copy, you just reply with your name and mailing address, and we will mail you a hard copy. So just wanted to make sure you had all that. So we're gonna practice this chat feature right now. Okay, we like to kind of get started with a few questions, and then we'll open it up to the panel. So we deal every day with all these ideas and misconceptions and truths that we have learned in society about every process we deal with. One of the things that we find is people don't necessarily know what their normal down payment is for a home. We'll talk about that more as we go along, but I want to take a couple of minutes to ask, what do you think the average down payment is among first-time home buyers as a percentage of the purchase price? Use that chat feature and type in A, B, C, or D. A is 10%, B is 6%, C is 20%, and D is 3%. Just go ahead, put it in the chat, type in what you think it is. And for those of you that chose B, you would be correct. We know that we have all heard 20%, 20%, 20%. The reality is the average down payment is 6%. Now, for the average to be 6%, that means a lot of people have less than that. In fact, 80% of first-time home buyers put less than 20% down. That's just the norm. So in the invitation, it mentioned about wealth building as a homeowner. I just want you to think for a moment. If you wait 1 year to buy a home versus buying one now, assuming a $275,000 purchase price, and you use, say, 3% down as your down payment, which is, you can. How much wealth building would you lose out over the next year by waiting a year to buy versus buying now with 3% down? You think it's A, $7,200, B, $31,490, C, $16,291, or D, around $3,900? Remember, only 3% down, and at the end of a year, with the accumulated appreciation of the home value and the principal that you paid down on your mortgage payments, you would have $16,291 of equity based on historical averages here in our community in the Mecklenburg County area. And let's just extend that out to 3 years for a second, folks. For 3 years, it's $51,000. And this is why homeowners over time have 44 times the net worth of renters in the United States. So it's important. It's just an important financial tool because remember, you're putting a smaller down payment and you're earning the increased value of the entire value of the house while you're still paying down on your mortgage. One more question, and then we're going to go to our panel. The typical cost of using an exclusive buyer's agent versus using the listing agent to buy the house. When I say listing agent, I mean, whoever's name is on the sign that says call about this house, that's the listing agent. If you want to use your own exclusive buyer's agent that only represents you, what do you think the normal cost is? A, 3%, B, 1.5%, C, 0, and D, 6%. I see people putting it in the chat. I see more coming in. I'm not going to answer it. Instead, we're going to go to the panel, and I want to ask Tiff, will you, hold on, I want to pause this share.
Yes.
I am trying to stop my share. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Tiff White, what
Yes.
is the correct answer to how much an exclusive buyer's agent
Yes, that is
costs?
a big fat zero.
It's a big fat zero. Tell us about that.
Well, commissions are paid for by the sellers. So that means you, the buyer, can retain our services for free. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. And so, who pays that then? You gotta get paid somehow, right?
Right. So the seller at the closing table, when you're all sitting around signing the papers, that it comes out of the seller net, which is what the seller is getting from the sale. So the buyer who is at the closing table signing the loan docs, they don't pay for any of the buyer representation. So all the help that I give them and Megan as well, it's a free service in North and South Carolina.
That's fantastic. All right. And Megan, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about why it's important to have a buyer's agent versus just calling the listing agent. I know that's always a big question when we're in our live events. And folks, don't forget, you can start putting in to the chat, you can start putting in questions and we'll start reviewing those to ask our panel.
Sure. So that's a great question. I know a lot of people, obviously this is first time home buyers event, so you haven't been through this before, but having your own agent is having your representation. It's like having a coach and somebody that's going to be your partner and represent only you. So not only do we want to work for you and we have a moral obligation to you, but we have a legal obligation to you too, to represent your best interests. So we are your person from the very beginning to the very end. And the same thing goes for your lender, for your closing attorney. That's your team that we're putting together to be your people. So, I liken it a lot to buying a house without an agent is like showing up to court without a lawyer. The other side is going to have one.
Good analogy.
And you're showing up by yourself without the understanding of how to do that. So especially because it's free, it's kind of win-win. I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't want a buyer's agent.
Great.
So, yeah, questions about how that all works? I think only a few people got that question right. Was that surprising to people?
Yeah. Do we have anybody that wants to talk more about the buyer's agent? I hear Rashida says yes. And if you have a specific question, you can raise your hand and we'll let you articulate something further on that.
Well, and I think, Daniel, you kind of hit the nail on the head. When you're driving through a neighborhood, the sign in the yard is the listing agent. So that is the agent that by law has the seller's best interest at heart. Mm-hmm. They cannot represent you. And so when you call them up, they're not going to tell you that, there's a power line in the back that might hurt the sale of this home, when you're going to sell, or, anything that could help you. By law, they can't tell you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a great one that just came in. We get this a lot. Would a seller prefer to sell to someone who doesn't have a buyer's agent to save them more money since they have to pay the buyer's agent? Important question. So it doesn't actually save them money because they sign an agreement with their listing agent for a certain amount of money, a certain percent, and then that is split with the buyer's agent. So the actual seller doesn't save money. But on top of that, there's a lot of work involved. And again, if you've got somebody who's hoping to work with you unrepresented, that would be somebody I'd be wary of working with because it sounds like they want to take advantage of you. Just Tiff, do you have anything to add to that? I mean,
I absolutely agree. I think it's perfect.
I think the misconception that's out there from people is that if they deal with the listing agent directly, they're going to get a better deal. And that just, we can say, is not true.
Right. I mean, there's two negotiations, which we will probably talk about to all of you. Yeah. But one is the upfront negotiation to get the home under contract, which you would absolutely lose out on. Yes. And then once you're under contract, there's another negotiation with inspections. And I tell you what, it's very, very important to have representation during that time, someone who knows what they're doing. So that listing agent cannot give you their expertise.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, one of the things that's come up is when something through the process, if you're using a dual agent, and you guys mentioned one agent can be on the seller and the buyer side, they just make double the commission because they make what's allocated for each side for themselves.
Yeah.
But they cannot, they have to be neutral, and so they can't fight for our buyer.
Right. What they become.
You're not really allowed to.
Messenger. Right. They cannot represent either party at that point. So basically they just pass messages along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the question was, what's our overall recommendation? It's if you are buying a house, you need your own listing agent. So
absolutely.
You tell me or Tiff,
yes.
to work with you, but obviously there's a lot of agents, but you have to work, or we highly recommend get a buyer's agent from the very beginning. Don't wait until you see a house that you want and then all of a sudden you're scrambling to find somebody, you know, work with somebody that you like and trust up front. Don't, because on the back end, the first person who answers their phone isn't necessarily the person you want to work with.
I want to get to Tara's question, and this is going to be really geared toward Matt or Brenda. And Tara wants to know on VA loans. Oh, yeah. Tara says the sellers can pay up to 4% cost. What exactly does that mean? So why don't we just talk a little bit about what it means to have closing costs paid by the seller and what down payments are? Because it's kind of all wrapped up into one big topic, which ultimately is how much do I have to come out of pocket to buy a house, and how do I pay for the expenses of buying a house? So let's dive into that for Tara.
So let's start off by talking about the basic structure. When you're buying a house, you have, depending on what loan program you're using, you have X amount of percentage that is your down payment. And so let's just use round numbers here and say that you're buying a house for $100,000 and you're using 3% down program, you've got a loan for $97,000. So that means that your down payment portion is going to be 3% or $3,000. And then on top of that, you're going to have money that's going to be due for the closing costs and what we call prepaids. So these are additional things in addition to your down payment. And those are going to be your responsibility as well. That's, you know, paying any fees that are associated with any of the third parties and vendors that are, you know, associated with getting you that loan and buying you that house. Not the real estate fees, that's on the seller side as we covered before. And then also the setting up of your escrow accounts for taxes and insurance, the interim interest on your loan. There's these things that kind of we go over as lenders, we go over in exact detail so that you know what you can expect. And it is very typical for first-time home buyers in many transactions that you would negotiate that the sellers pay for all or a portion of those closing costs, because that's just like them giving you money into the transaction. It's particularly popular, you know, when rates are low, because you're in essence, you know, getting a good deal on that house, but you're in essence getting that money from the sellers to help pay for their own purchase. every loan program has a different, to point to Tara's question, every loan program that you're using has a different cap or threshold that they'll allow you where the sellers can contribute. Some loan programs are, they'll allow 6%. The seller can contribute 6% of the total transaction. That's a lot of money on many transactions. But for VA loans in particular, Veterans Administration loans, that's, that has a cap of 4% where they'll allow the seller to contribute up to 4% of your closing costs. And when we're here in the office or doing one of our video conferences where we're walking this through, with our clients, I try to show everybody how important that is. So if somebody has a house, let's say, and they're putting, let's use my scenario that I had, and they're putting they're buying a house for $100,000 and putting a 3% down payment. And they have $25,000 in liquid funds that they've set aside for the down payment. Then in that situation, they might not want to negotiate the seller paying for those closing costs. They might want to get the best deal on the house that they can, and they'll pay for the closing costs because they can afford it with the reserves that they have. Now, counter that with a scenario where somebody wants to buy, a $300,000 house, and they're still using 3% down, and all of the savings that they have is really going towards that down payment. And if we pay for the closing costs, in addition to that, that's going to be wiping out all their savings. And so that's not what they want to do. They want to buy that house, but they don't want to wipe out their savings doing it. Then we communicate with the real estate agent to make sure that they know that we have got to structure this contract so that we have those closing costs, all of them, or at least part of them paid. And that's why, and you're going to hear this a lot tonight, that's why it's great to have a good team behind you. And we communicate and we sort of manage this behind the scenes. And with communication between the client and the real estate agent and your lending professional, we really cover this to make sure there are no surprises for you. And we have the plan up front. And then as we execute every stage of the process, everything, there's no surprises, and all this is covered along the way.
Excellent.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Brenda, Lisa asked if someone's owned for a home before, like it's been a while, 12 years ago, can he be considered a first-time home buyer again? And while we're at it, let's just talk about this concept of first-time home buyer and how that may or may not help.
So there are a number of different programs out there for first-time home buyers. Some of them allow for less of a down payment. Some of them get you a better interest rate on the conventional side. And then some of them allow you to get some down payment money from different entities, some within the city of Charlotte, some within the state of North Carolina. So those are the things that are available out there for first-time home buyers. And the answer to the question is yes. If it's been more than 2 years since you've owned a home, then you're now considered a first-time home buyer again.
Great. So then Lisa might be able to take advantage of some of the benefits that may be available again if it's been that long. So that's great. I appreciate it.
Taylor just asked a question that pertains to this, so I'm going to go ahead and answer it. Says, I heard that the first-time home buyers programs is suspended during COVID-19. Is that true? It's not. Well, I can't speak for every first-time home buyer program around. The ones I'm aware of, the North Carolina Bond Program, the Charlotte Housing Program, those are still up and running. So they take a little bit longer because people are working from home and they're not as efficient as they were, but they're certainly not unavailable.
But we even have, for first-time home buyers, without down payment assistance programs, certain advantages with conventional loans, such as improved rates and improved rates and improved mortgage insurance premiums, which really just drives the cost down. And that's not dependent on any of what you typically think of as that first-time homebuyer program, right? Those are still
absolutely correct. Yep.
100% available, no issues, right?
Right.
Can I put in a plug for the home rent program while we're on here?
Mm-hmm.
Just so everybody knows, if you make, it has an income cap on it, but it's a conventional loan program designed for first-time home buyers. If you make below, in Mecklenburg County, $60,400 a year, If you make below that, you can do 3% down, but it's not just 3% down, because conventional programs do have a 3% down program already. But it's at really good interest rates that match the 5% regular conventional programs. And it's also with discounted mortgage insurance. It's a great program for people. We put people, anybody that qualifies for them, we like to put them in there because it's really hard to beat. And if you qualify for that, you'd be shocked. A lot of people are shocked, you know, they make below that figure and they're shocked at what they can do. With the interest rates the way they are right now, your buying power at that salary level has never been greater than it is in the history of man right now. It's amazing what you can buy. We're getting people that are renting for much higher than they're buying a house for these days because of the buying power of the rates and phenomenal programs like that. So that's my quick plug for Home Ready.
And real quick on that topic, Matt, you just mentioned the buying power from rental amounts. Brenda, you and I were looking at that earlier. Do you have that sheet handy where we had that grid? We were looking at what the buying power. Okay. Matt, I don't know if you have it, but if not, I'll look it up and we can talk about it in a few minutes. But the buying power of if you're renting and you're spending a certain amount. So we'll pull that back up and cover that in a couple of minutes.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I can speak to this because we are seeing a lot of this. But normally, just typically, historically, when you are renting in a certain city, when you go to buy a house, we would always imagine that you are going to, that payment is going to go up above what your rental value, what your rental cost is. It's just the way it's always been. You've got taxes, you've got homeowners insurance, you've got all these additional costs. Now, granted, you're getting the equity growth from that appreciating asset, and you're getting this brand new house that's yours, and you can do anything you want to it. So there are all these side benefits. But here in the Charlotte market, because rental prices have gone so through the roof, and you guys know that who were in these meetings, we talked to everybody. We were amazed when we started having these events at just exactly what people were paying in rent. It blew us away. I mean, we just were shocked. So we're seeing, you know, break even. We're buying a house that they're upgrading their, you know, instead of renting an apartment, they're buying a single family house, and their payments with taxes, insurance, and escrows, everything are breaking the same, if not lower. And that's just extremely rare. And that's only because, you know, rates are at their historical lows, and you live in a city where, even though, you know, housing values, you might look around and see how expensive houses are, but rental prices are up too. And so that's the situation we find ourselves in our area.
I actually found this little grid. I'm just going to share it with our attendees. It's powerful. Okay. So just think for a moment, if you spend about $1,500 a month in rent, that equates to about $275,000 in buying power all in. If you're spending $2,000, which is not an uncommon rent in Charlotte, you have about $360,000 of buying power. If you're spending $2,500, you got $450 of buying power. And that means your payment stays the same, including your taxes and insurance, but you're in an ownership position. So that's always a question that comes up, and people are often surprised at just how far it goes. And I think Matt talked about it earlier. It's just interest rates are just so low right now. Aren't you finding, Tiff and Megan, it's amazing what people are buying these days? I mean, the average purchase price when they're looking at their rental to buying is pretty incredible.
Oh, I agree. But it's the cheapest money you can get right now. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. And I tell you what, an objection sometimes renters have that I find, and Megan probably as well, is the cost to break the lease. You know, sometimes it's a 2-month cost, but that really big picture can be absorbed. So Matt was talking about those closing costs that we can possibly negotiate with the seller. I mean, if that's a $4,000 amount, that's easily negotiated into our offer. And so that just gets wiped away right then and there.
And Tiff, I'm sure you're about to get to this too, but the people a lot of the time don't realize that rent is due before you live there, but mortgage is due, it's like a bill after you've already lived there. Yeah. So if you are closing on, or if you are closing on a house in, you know, the first week of August, you actually won't owe your first mortgage payment until October 1st.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's a really important point.
even if it costs you an extra month's rent to break your lease, you actually have a full month to kind of catch up on that, where your payment won't overlap.
You know what, Megan, it's such a good point. In fact, we've got a client that's closing with TIF, I think, next week.
Yes.
And that's exactly what she did. I think TIF negotiated for that client to have some closing costs paid by the seller. And then she used the differential between when her first mortgage payment would be due and then a little bit of savings to cover the 2-month fee to break her lease so that she could start, owning her home now, and she couldn't be happier. So we've got a real life example right now where they did exactly what Megan just talked about with TIF. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Daniel, before we get too far, there are a couple of questions I want to make sure we didn't miss. Matt, you mentioned the $60,400 for a single person. What is it for a married couple? You know,
unfortunately, they don't change the rules, which they should. It should be like filing tax returns or something like that. But unfortunately, it's household income. So that there are a couple of ins and outs to that program that really make it awesome. But that's one of the things that I wish they would change.
I would encourage, though, if you're thinking, gosh, I just missed it, I'm at 65 or 70 or something like that. Oftentimes we find, depending on how the income is constructed, that you still qualify. Like, for example, if you have overtime or commissions and you made over that, sometimes we can qualify you on the lower amount. So don't get discouraged. What I would encourage everyone to do is don't get caught up in learning the guidelines. Get caught up in going through a thorough pre-approval. And in fact, maybe Matt or Brenda can talk a little bit about that, what the pre-approval entails and what that means and why it's important. And then we can turn to Tiff and Megan to talk about, from the real estate side, when they like to have that pre-approval and the importance of that as well. So maybe one of you can talk about that for us.
I'll dive in and walk through the pre-approval process from our side. So typically you might have a lender that you're working with ahead of a real estate agent, or you'd be on the flip side, you might have a real estate agent. They're going to tell you to come to me and get pre-qualified, because they don't, unless you've got hundreds of $1,000s in the account that you're going to use as cash to buy a house, you're going to need a loan. And so they're going to send you to us so that you can be pre-approved, and they know that you can trust that pre-approval because we've done such a thorough process. In the same way that when we're finished with somebody and we have somebody ready to go that's a potential buyer, we're going to get them involved, because now we've got you set up and we want to get you out there looking at properties. The pre-approval process for us is, particularly with first-time home buyers, since we deal with them so much, it's pretty fun and it's pretty interesting. We bring you into the office, or we've been doing video conferences. And one of the things that we like to do, you can't see my office set up here right now, but I have 3 monitors, and 2 of them are for me and 1 of them is for you. And we take you right inside your loan file and we go through all the numbers, and we've already got a good application that we're working with, and I've done some of the background work on it. And then we do the work on your specific program, where we walk you through your specific situation, where we walk you through what your options are, and we lay out the budget, we lay out what the plan is, and we go pretty deep, and so that you are educated on every step of the way and not surprised by anything, and that we have a good plan going forward. And then, I'll let, Tiff and Megan talk about the process and why that's so important and what happens then on their side.
Sure. So, yeah, absolutely. People come to me all the time, and they want to know, they see a house or they see an awesome area, and they want to start seeing, taking tours and seeing the insides of homes, which is wonderful and fun. And it's like the best thing. But you really do need to start on the lending side. So that's where I would say, do you have a pre-approval? Do you know what your budget is? Do you know what you're comfortable with payment? And if they do not, I absolutely send them to the True Loan team, and I don't get anything from it, just so you know. What I do get is the knowledge and the comfort that they are being taken care of. And I have all sorts of great stories, guys, which we can talk about at another time. But even this weekend, I actually was the listing agent on a condo at the lake, and a buyer came unrepresented, I do not practice dual agency like we talked earlier. I would not represent him and the seller at the same time. So I assigned him an agent to represent him. So he got the best representation, and he did not have a lender. And so I made sure that that buyer talked to Matt and Brenda and Daniel. And so wouldn't you know, it was a multiple offer situation. And that was part of our decision for that gentleman to win that deal, because I knew as the listing agent representing my seller that that buyer had sound advice, was absolutely pre-approved, and was going to close on the deal. So
That's great.
good story.
Yeah, we love that. Oh, by the way, can we go back real quick? Matt or Brenda, Mackenzie asked if I make under the amount, but my boyfriend makes significantly more, it's still a bad idea to buy the house before we're married. By the way, everyone, I just want to remind you, you can use that raise your hand feature if you want to express your question with your voice. We are happy to hear you as well. But this works with the chat beautifully as well. Just want to remind everybody. I guess the question really is, if there's a reason to wait until you're married to buy a house, particularly if you're thinking about these first-time homebuyer programs. So talk about how much emphasis one should put on those first-time homebuyers programs, or whether there's an advantage to waiting or not waiting, and can non-married couples buy together? Just kind of walk through that for a moment.
Well, the answer initially is yes. Non-married couples can buy a house together. Absolutely. So that and just so you know, you now both own the house together. So just kind of keep that in mind. But you are going to get married. So, but as far as someone being, whether you're a first-time home buyer or not a first-time home buyer, I'm not saying there are some advantages to it, but because interest rates are so low right now, it's honestly, being a first-time home buyer and being a 10-time home buyer, there's not that big of discrepancy anymore, just because it's almost flat. So in other words, it's time to buy a house right now is a good time, because their interest rates are low, and and there's lots of different programs out there to kind of catch just about everybody.
And the reality is, just think back to the beginning. Remember the slides were about just that wealth building process, and starting that sooner than later.
Yeah.
It's a financial thing more than anything else. When you think of it from that perspective. Matt, you had something?
I would speak to this. I see a lot of this. I see more non-married borrowers every single day buying houses. And it's just a trend in our general society that people are pushing that marriage back further than they're pushing back buying a house. Mm-hmm. I would say that the answer for each individual, that's what's going on in their life. If you're ready to buy a house but not ready to get married, or I've had 2 situations so far this year of young people who were waiting to get married later this year. They even had the wedding set up, and they were going to wait until that was done and then focus on buying the house. COVID crisis comes. They shelve the marriage plans and they focus on the house plan. They're going to get that done and then worry about the wedding later, because all their wedding plans were thrown, out the window. So it's what's going on in your life that is important. When you come in, and I'll speak to the structure. When 2 people come in with their life situation and we sit down and talk about their situation, that's when we start formulating the plan and the structure. So about who's going to be the borrower, is it good to have both of them? You can both be on title as owners of the house, but only one person on the loan. We help you with all these things to make sure that the loan and the house and the situation that you're getting into best fits your life.
Well, and for that matter, you can also have co-borrowers that don't live in the house. There are just so many options. If you're looking to buy a house and you've made the decision that you want to explore that, I think the most important thing is to know that there are so many programs and so many options that just having that one-on-one discussion with our team will give you, arm you with those options, and then you can go out and plan. Before we leave this and move on to the next question, I just want to touch on Josh. He popped in there with something. I was going to call on him anyway, related to this question about unmarried. Because Brenda said, don't forget, you're going to own it together. Josh, there are different ways that you hold title. Without getting into too deep into that, can you just tell everybody there are different ways, different ways that you go about holding title in the Carolinas, depending on your situation, whether you're married or not, right? Everybody has a choice on that, right?
Yeah, and like I was saying in my message there, I've done a 30-minute segment just on that one issue alone, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. So there are some considerations, and if anyone has any specific questions, I encourage you to reach out and ask about that. But there are two ways to take title when you're not married, and that's either as joint tenants with rights of survivorship or tenants in common. And the main thing that's going to be different between these two options is what happens if one of you were to unfortunately pass before you got married, and how the ownership of that interest of the property would pass either to the surviving member or to their heirs.
So here's the great thing. You go out and you guys decide you want to get pre-approved to talk to Matt or Brenda. You do that. You get with Megan or Tiff. You find a house. Then, okay, how do we want to do that? Then you talk to Josh. You figure that all out and you're good. So that goes back to that team concept that Matt mentioned earlier, which is always really important. I want to set up Megan and Tiff for this question that was asked earlier. It's almost a trick question, but let's just talk about it. One of the people asked, I can't see it right now, is there a certain neighborhood that's the best neighborhood, or are there certain neighborhoods that you work with?
Charlotte.
I mean, just kind of talk about
What I said.
Finding the right neighborhood.
I actually answered that, Daniel, because it really is the entire Charlotte area,
Yes.
including Fort Mill, Rock Hill, Indian Land. I mean, Charlotte is, it's a rock star in by way of like market. Every other market is nothing compared to us, and it's only growing. And so for you all to try to get a piece of that is really important.
I encourage you, when we complete this call and you get that email, to download that booklet that I mentioned. Because in there's the last article in the booklet is about buying during COVID. And it's a national publication that printed that article. And they mentioned 3 markets that are particularly strong even amid COVID-19. And Charlotte was listed as one of those booming markets. I can look out, we did this the other day. Matt and Brenda and I looked out our window in our office, and we have the fortune to have a great view of South End and the uptown skyline. We counted 11 cranes. 11 cranes at once. It's crazy. Charlotte's just a great market. It's growing. People are moving here every day, and housing prices continue to go up. So I encourage you to read that article. But as long as we talk about COVID, let's just talk about that for a second. I think that's on everyone's mind. All the differences and what's changed about the process of shopping for a home, given the COVID-19 situation. Tiff and Megan, maybe talk about that for everybody. Let them know what to expect.
Sure. So I can start with that one, Tiff. And I think the most important thing is about public health and about your safety and about the safety of the homeowner. So we will take every precaution that we can to make sure that everybody is safe and healthy. Obviously, if you're sick, if you're not feeling well, we don't go look at houses. But assuming everybody is well, homes are open for showing right now, and we can wear masks and gloves and boots, shoe covers. But really, aside from about a 30-day kind of hiatus where in Mecklenburg County we weren't able to show right in the beginning of all this, right in March and April, now everything is back open to show in all of Mecklenburg County, and you guys can see things as much or as little as you want to. With that being said, I think that just from my perspective, I've seen some changes in people are doing a lot more with online shopping. So home tours, like virtual tours, have really taken off. Whereas we used to just get a lot of pictures. Now I know for all of our listings, we're doing a full virtual tour so that buyers can see the home really as they walk through the home online. So I think with my clients, I'm seeing a lot of folks narrow it down more online. So they're, instead of sending me 20 houses, they say, actually, we've already run the tours, we've driven the neighborhood. Now I only have 8 that I want to see. Because, you know, so it's been interesting to me. I think people have been kind of doing a little more homework. And I think they actually, the virtual tours, and people are doing more work on the listing side too, so that you get more information up front. So I think as a buyer, you're actually getting a really big benefit through all of this COVID situation. Is that what you've been seeing too, Tiff?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And honestly, what I've seen too is that it hasn't slowed down. Again, maybe in that first 3-week period, it hasn't slowed down lending. It hasn't slowed down what Josh does at Costner Law. So I think there's a perception out there that things really slowed down even within the transaction, and that just did not happen.
Yeah, I think we felt the same way.
On this related topic, I went to a walkthrough yesterday for a closing that was happening at 1. The walkthrough was at 12. The buyer had never seen the house. They're moving from out of state.
Incredible.
They utilized virtual tours, satellite images, all this research that they did. And the funny thing was, when we got to the walkthrough, you know, and everybody's a little nervous, like, are you going to like this house?
Right.
And the one thing that they were shocked by was the house. It was a big house, but the house to them was bigger than they were expecting. All the rooms were bigger than they thought, which is unusual, because if you look on like hotel rooms or websites that have vacation houses, you kind of have to discount the size with that wide angle lens. But for this couple, they were shocked at how spacious the house was, and that was a great surprise. They were super happy, and
usually,
you know, that was that.
Yeah.
Usually things look bigger on camera. I'm pretty sure I do right now. I hope I'm really smaller than it looks right now, right? So, okay, we have a savvy question here. A savvy question about private mortgage insurance. If I put less than 20% down, and then I get to where I built up equity of 20% down, can I drop that component? So Brenda, why don't you take this and give a quick overview of what private mortgage insurance is, and then answer the rest of the question.
Okay. So private mortgage insurance, regardless of whether it's coming via a government loan or a conventional loan, is just you as the borrower paying an upfront and or monthly fee because you don't have 20% down. So it's going to a company, or it's going to the government to protect the lender. Should you default, it's going to protect the lender for that 20% part because you don't have 20% down. So that's what private mortgage insurance is. Now,
doesn't protect the buyer, it just helps them have less than 20% down, right?
Yes,
okay.
It allows you to get into a house without 20% down.
Gotcha.
So the company or the government it offers this to you at a cost. Government mortgage insurance is different than conventional insurance because government loans have they hit you twice. Once upfront, a percentage of the loan amount, and then once monthly. So that one time upfront that when you close on the loan, you finance that money and it's paid. And then the monthly insurance, depending on the loan, is there through the entire loan. Unless you sell it or refinance it, it does not go away.
Brenda, when you say a government loan, what do you mean?
I mean a USDA loan, a veterans loan, or an FHA loan.
Got it. Okay. All right.
And then conventional loans, depending on if you have 3%, 5%, 15%, or 20%, your mortgage insurance cost will be different. It gets less depending on the more you put down. And then it can go away. Once you hit 78% of the value of the home when you bought it and your balance on your loan, it will automatically go away. If your home appreciates or you pay your mortgage down sooner than that amount of time, you can actually call your lender, order an appraisal, and they will take it off as long as you've had the loan for more than either 2 or 3 years, depending on the type of loan.
A lot of options.
Yes.
A lot of options. So again, I would reiterate, we want to make sure you're well informed, but please don't try to learn all of the guidelines. We get surprised by new guidelines every day. So we want to answer these questions and make sure you kind of have a good understanding. But at the same time, I encourage you to dig deep on your personal situation with a pre-approval appointment, just so you know what your options are for your specific situation. Matt, you were going to say something?
Yeah, and the thing I advise people all the time is don't be afraid of mortgage insurance. That's what's allowing you to get in that house that you want, and it's allowing you to generate that wealth and buy a house. If I hear people saving up to avoid MI or structuring a loan, one first loan with a second loan, or doing all these tricks. Mortgage insurance has never been cheaper than it is right now. And if you've got good credit, especially, it's remarkable how affordable it is. Do not be afraid of it. That's what allows you to get in that house and build that wealth. So you should embrace it and just look at your option and choose the best one for you.
Matt, you just set yourself up for the next question. Someone asked about credit scores and what minimum credit score they need to have before they explore pre-approval or buy a home. Talk to us about that.
Well, the first thing I would say is that we have the normal rules that apply, and then the rules that apply during this COVID crisis that we're in, because things have changed along the way. So typically what we would say to people is that, all the way down to 580 credit score, you can get an FHA loan. FHA is kind of designed for a couple of options with people with low down payment or with some credit blemishes in the past. So that's changed during the COVID crisis. And so it's hard to get a loan under 620 now just across the board. And that's going to change over time, but for the time being, that's the way it is. And then once you get above that 620 figure, you still have some challenges in terms of, getting a mortgage. But from that 620 to 640 range, you can still get a loan. It just might, that's when we really need to take a look and do some work, and why your situation has to be examined on its own. And then as we get above that 640, we get into the conventional range at 660 and above there. A lot of the people that I talk to on a daily basis have an idea of what's in their head based on Credit Karma or CreditWise. Right. Or even services through the credit bureaus like Equifax, and they have an idea of what their score is. That's not your score. It hasn't been right. I poll everybody that applies. Do not think that you necessarily know what your credit score is. And I'm sorry to say that, but it's the truth. I was on Credit Karma, and my score, I refinanced this year, and my score was 45 points lower than what my actual score is. And that's common. I see it every single day. I ask people every day, like, what do you think your credit score is? And they always tell me, I saw it last week on Credit Karma. No, I wouldn't necessarily trust that. So every situation is different, but that's kind of a guideline. And another thing as it pertains to credit reports, a lot of people, you have to know what your actual credit score is, for a mortgage. And do not be afraid. There is a mechanism that's built into the scoring models that if you have a lot of pulls on your credit report, that it does flag you and start, diminishing your score. But we're talking about a lot of pulls. And so do not be afraid to go out there and have a mortgage professional, take a look at your score for the pre-approval. We need to know what the plan is, whether you're planning on buying 2 months from now or 6 months from now or 1 year from now. And so don't be afraid. A lot of times we have a technical reason why we have to re-pull a customer's credit score after we've already pulled it. And most of the time the credit score goes up. So a lot of what people think about credit scores is a little bit of a myth, and so many things in the mortgage business are. So I would just speak to a professional and come in and let's talk about it, and we'll go through your situation specifically.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I'll just add one thing to that. When you talk about the scores are different, particularly if someone goes right on the Equifax and they get their Equifax score, you would think that would be reliable. And it is a credit score. What they don't tell you is there are different formulations, whether there's a credit score for Equifax credit score for a car loan, there's one for credit cards, there's one for mortgages, and they have slightly different formulas based on the data and the risk profile for what you're acquiring. So it's reformulated based on who is pulling it, and the consumer credit reports that you're pulling, and that I pull for myself for that matter, won't necessarily match up to the one we use. And then, when we do it, we also pull all three scores and we use the middle one. So Again, if you're interested in buying and you're not sure if you qualify, ask us. It doesn't cost anything. We don't charge you anything to pull your credit. We do it as a service, and we give you a plan.
Can we hear anybody else?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good. Let's
Okay.
tackle some other questions. I see we've got a backlog here, right? I love it.
Okay, Matt, I saw some for you and Brenda.
Yeah, let's go.
How far in advance should I get pre-approved? Like what happens if I'm 3 to 6 to 9 months out? And then another one was, if I get pre-approved for a certain amount, how stuck am I to that number?
We get asked that all the time.
Yeah, so great
Both
question.
very good questions.
Yeah, for sure. It's never too early to be pre-approved because you never know what life is going to throw you. So it's better to have the plan set early rather than late. I pre-approve people all the time, and their plan maybe is 6 months from now when when their lease is up, they start looking at houses. One pops up in their neighborhood that they really love, and they want to move on it right now. And all of a sudden they fall in love with that house. So listen, I try to say early and often, let's say you've got some obstacle to pre-approval. We need to know that up front. We do not need that to be a surprise on down the road. If you think that you're going to, oh, I'm going to buy a house in a couple of months, I'll start looking, that's too late. We need to get in and get early and come up with the plan. And as far as the term on the pre-approval, this is what I tell people all the time. As long as your financial situation stays the same, it should be good. We ask that people who are out searching, who are active pre-approvals, that have a real estate agent, and we're working as a team. We ask that they just check in with us if there is some major change to their finances. It could be simple stuff like, hey, you need to buy a new car. Look, it may be totally fine, but we need to know that up front. If you're adding to that debt to income ratio, we need to know that and factor it into all our plans. But, if you lose your job, obviously we need to know about that in this crazy time. But for the most part, credit expires in either 90 or 120 days. That's kind of irrelevant. We'll pull a new credit report if we have to. If nothing changes, everything should be fine. We've got a lot of clients that we've been working with for a long time. You've got to remember, in this city, there is a supply shortage. So we've got a lot of buyers out there who want to buy, and we wish there were more houses for sale, to be honest. And every one of us on this panel, can back that up. So sometimes it takes a while to get, some people have a very wide scope of what they can afford and what they want, and some people have a very narrow scope. So look, it may take a while for your individual situation. It's never too early to get involved in the process of pre-approval.
Quick sound check. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about that. One of the questions that one of our attendees asked was, if I think my job is going to move me in 2 to 7 years, is it worth buying, or what should I do? So I would actually like to hear two perspectives. One, maybe Brenda or Matt could talk about, I know we've got a software that kind of talks about the equity position you're building, and it uses, so maybe talk about that from the lending side. And then I would like to also hear from the realtor side, because I know you guys deal with a lot of people whose jobs move them a lot. And I want to hear that perspective. I'm really curious to hear that. So Matt or Brenda, you want to talk about from the lending side first?
Brenda, go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure what to say on the lending side. You're going to purchase a home. I guess the only thing is, if you're going to only be in a home for 2 to 3 years, you might look at, oftentimes people, when they get an interest rate, they could say, look, I might want to pay a discount and get a lower interest rate. And if that's a good idea, as long as you're going to stay in the house long enough for it to pay off. But if you're going to only stay in it for a couple of years on the lending side, I would advise that you stay with a rate that you don't have to pay any discount on.
In fact, sometimes you can opt to take just a slightly higher rate and you can pay some of the closing costs. And so those would be some considerations. I think that's good advice.
One thing I'd add on that is, we do have a lot of people that, have that situation where they might be moving soon or transferred in the next, let's say 2 to 7 years. So let's call that 5 years. That's 5 years of renting in that city that you're going to be missing out on that equity growth. And then let's not forget, we've got some savvy young borrowers who are first-time home buyers and who plan on moving at a certain point out of Charlotte. But their plan up front, since interest rates are so low now, is they're going to buy this property. They're going to live in it for 2 to 7 years, and they're going to save up money while they're doing that. They're going to buy a new property in a new city, hold on to this property in Charlotte and rent that out because we're such a hot rental market. And so there's a lot of people that have that plan up front. They know that's what they're going to do. So yeah, I wouldn't discount that either. So there's no way I would know, if I'm going to be in a city for 5 years, I would miss out on that equity growth in a city like Charlotte.
Right.
We've got a rent versus buy analysis software we can run for you if you want us to, and it can show you, and it's got a slider bar to look at for different times. It reminds me of a question that I heard someone ask a while back, and he said, do you know what interest rate your landlord pays you on your rent when you move out? Of course, there is none, right? You're keeping it all. So it's always an interesting analysis. What do you guys think on the real estate side? Do you think it's worth it? Let's just say if it was only 2 years, is it worth it? Is it not? I mean, what do you guys see people doing?
I'm gonna say, go ahead, Megan. Go ahead.
It's a hard question. Somebody asked for what's the break-even calculation. It's got to be situation by situation, right? So it depends on the purchase price and the neighborhood and, how much you're putting down. That analysis that you did in the beginning with 3% down, you're paying a lot more interest than principal on a 3% loan versus if you put 20% down, that equity is going to come in a lot faster. And even on a $275,000 house, in 3 years, it was $50,000 in equity at a 3% down.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
That's pretty damn good by my count. So if I were only going to live here for 3 years, I'd buy a house. If I was going to live here for 6 months, I wouldn't, because I wouldn't want to pay the fees to sell it and all that jazz.
Right.
But I think that this market is appreciating so quickly, and it's such a hot market that people are making money very, very quickly on their homes. If you love the neighborhood and you want to be there, I definitely call us and talk to us about it. It's case by case, but I would say it's pretty rare that it wouldn't be a good call. And if it wasn't, we wouldn't let you buy that house.
It's funny, Megan, that you say that, because I'm just reminded, just last night, we had a client come to us that bought his house in January of 18. So we're talking about just over 2.5 years, right? Paid $193,000 for that house. And that house is now worth $255,000. So
That's
even
very
after paying, and so even after paying a real estate, if he was leaving and selling it, even if after he paid real estate fees, he's still making a lot of money. And he said he was paying his mortgage payments about what he used to pay in rent. So I think that kind of summarizes it, right? Yeah.
Were you going to say anything on that I didn't touch?
No, I was just going to say, I agree. Absolutely. First of all, you could plan on 2 to 3 years, but that life throws all sorts of things at you, right? So you might end up not moving or moving sooner or later. But our market provides us options, just like Matt said. I mean, if you can afford to buy here, you need to. So if you buy a home and then, 2 years later, you've got a family, a life change happens, and you want another home, first option is try to look to see if you can keep that, because again, it's the cheapest money you can get. I mean, your mortgage is not going to raise, rents raise. And so see if you can keep it and then move on to another home. That is always the first thing I look at with my clients.
And that's a great point, if you don't mind me jumping in. I know I'm not a realtor, but my best friend from college just moved back to Charlotte. And like you said, you never know what life's going to throw your way. He had bought a house near the music factory 4 years ago. And then unexpectedly, just 2 months later, not talking 2 or 3 years, but 2 months later, his job transferred him to Raleigh, and he held on to the house and rented it out. And in the 4 years between then and now, when he just moved back last week, he's gained over $100,000 in equity, not including the amount of his mortgage that's been paid down by somebody else. I mean, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, we're very, very lucky to live where we're living.
Yeah. One of our attendees asked about student loans and how that impacts qualifying. Brenda, maybe you could talk about that a little bit. I know I hear you and Matt dealing with that with clients every day.
So student loans, again, it really goes back to the type of loan that you get. Each of the different types of loans look at student loan debt differently. Sometimes we have to, regardless of whether you're paying, whether it's in deferment or whether you're on an income-based payment or not, we have to use 1% of the total amount on one particular type of loan, and then other types of loan allow us to use whatever payment you're making. If you're on an income-based payment, I had someone the other day who has $60,000 worth of loans, and she makes a payment of $12 a month. So
and you got to count that.
I got to count $12. So it didn't hurt her at all. So it really, again, goes to what type of loan we decide to put you in that's best for you on how we look at those student loans. So don't be afraid of them.
And it really, it's a spider web. And that's what we're here for. So if you've got student loans, what I would say is a lot of clients have student loans. And if you have student loans and you are renting and you can afford to buy a house and pay about the same as what you're renting, it's even better. It's even more compelling to buy, because the equity you're building is wealth building while you're still paying off those student loans. So a lot of people think, I just want to pay down that loan and pay it until it's off, and then I can buy later in life. When actually, if you can qualify and afford the small down payment to buy, it offsets that payment to the student loans and the wealth building that's there. So, don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of that. Another question was a COVID-related question. Someone says, hey, I have been furloughed. How does that impact my ability to buy a house? So talk to us about that, Matt.
Listen, during this crisis, it's impacted so many people, but the reality of the situation is, in order to get a loan, you have to have income that shows you have the ability to pay back that loan. That is the number one component that exists, and it's the fundamental pillar of lending philosophy. So, we're all making allowances for that, but until you have, let's say a person is furloughed, then until they get back to work, until they have the regular income that's documentable, and we can show that, things are, past this crisis for them in their particular industry, we're really, your hands are really tied. And so a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines waiting. We have a lot of borrowers that this has impacted, in the last few months. And now we're starting to see them, okay, going back to work. All right, the pay stubs are coming in again, and we're getting a little bit of a sense of normalcy back. But the bottom line is, a lot of us, there's no harm in getting pre-approved, on the front end of this and during this crisis. And when you come out, it's better to know what your options are, because a lot of people, every situation is different. Some people, I have one client that was at American Airlines and voluntarily took a program where they're, instead of furloughing a bunch of people, they voluntarily took a cut in pay down to bare minimum, but they're still employed. Come see us and we'll walk through all these options with you, because, everybody's situation is different and the rules are sort of changing all the time on what we can and can't do.
I do want to make one comment, because I read the rest of her question. It says, what can I do to make sure that when I get my job back, I'll be ready? My advice to you is, these are very unusual times. There are lenders, there are auto folks and credit card people who are offering to allow you to not make payments for an X amount of time. So I say take them up on it, but follow their rules, because if you go outside their rules, then they're going to report you late. But if you stay within their rules, then they won't report you late. It won't affect your credit at all. They'll likely tag that on to the end, and it won't affect you. So if you're getting those offers and you are out of a job, take every one of them up on it and follow their rules. And when it's time to go back to paying, hopefully you've saved enough and you can get back to paying and stay on time.
But don't stop paying just because you think you're allowed to. You actually have to make a formal arrangement with them and get it in writing that they say, you have 3 months to not pay, we'll tack it on to the end, and it will not report late on your credit report. You have to get that. You can't anticipate it. And yes, sometimes you're going to spend 3 hours on hold waiting for them. But if you preemptively don't pay because you were on for an hour and a half and got tired of holding, then it doesn't work. So take Brenda's advice and make sure to do it exactly as they say. All right, I have a question for our realtors. First-time home buyers, you know, I look out there and I see as many single-family homes as I do condos all over Charlotte. Do you have an opinion? Is it more about personal preference and lifestyle, or is there an investment difference? Is there a compelling reason to look or not look at one type of property as a first-time home buyer? And how do you guide prospective buyers as to just sort of what type of property to buy?
Megan, you want to take that one?
Sure. I'll take the first part of it. I think the most important thing is preference, right? I mean, it's different for everybody. There are, having a condo, there are definitely perks to that, right? A lot of the time with a condo, you're going to get amenities. You're also going to get a lot of things paid for. So depending on what type of condo it is, if it's like a townhome, or, you know, you may get lawn care, or, you know, your roof is covered. So things like that. But single family homes have like HOAs and other perks, and there's different pricing. So it all depends. To me, a big factor when I'm working with people who are looking for condos or townhomes is location. So they want to live in the South End for, you know, less than $400,000. It's more likely we're going to find them a condo that's upgraded and has a pool and is walkable to their favorite bars and restaurants than a single family home, because that's going to be a little more than $300,000 in the South End. So I think that to me is kind of where we start, is why are you buying a house in the first place? You know, is it
right
to get onto this equity, or is it, hey, I've got a dog and I want to give him a backyard? Well, that kind of narrows down our options on condos. So I think it's all about who you are and what's most important to you.
So it's really a preference thing more than anything.
That's my opinion on it.
Sure. Because I would say a lot of what we focus on is the investment aspect of owning a home in terms of building wealth, but there's also the, hey, this is where I'm going to live aspect. And so one must balance that. And when you go online from the email we're going to send you, and you download those 2 books, that blue one that has the little infographic on it about buying your first home, as I mentioned earlier, there's about 4 pages that ask you compelling questions to ponder and think about that will help you, if you haven't thought about that, kind of really focus in on what the right type of property is. And then you really dig into that with your realtor. From a lending perspective, you know, we lend on any of those properties. So we want you to get the property that's right for you.
Daniel, I can comment on a recent situation that sort of encapsulates this, what Megan was saying. Someone that came to our event, great client that we had, first-time home buyer. She's a teacher. She was, you know, pretty set on single family. When she went out looking at properties, however, in her price range, she really felt like she did not feel safe in the houses that she was looking at, and she just didn't feel comfortable with the single family environment, and decided along the way to change gears and go to the townhome route, because, you know, she's now, we bought a great house in a great neighborhood. She loves her neighbors. It's gated. She feels great there. There's 4 units and she's on, you know, the end. And so she shares that dwelling, and there's this community atmosphere. And she just felt great about it the first time she walked into that place. So, I mean, to Megan's point, it's all about the lifestyle that you want and all about the amenities you want. To her point, you know, I get a lot of the people with the, you know, 2 big dogs. No, they're not condo shopping. They need a fenced in backyard, and that is the most important thing, because dogs run the whole show. So
it's 7:14. We promised to wrap up by 7:30. We may wrap up a few minutes early. There's a question or 2 here I want to make sure we touch on, and that was about building or buying existing properties. So I guess there's 2 sides. Does it make a difference in the loan, and is there a difference from the real estate side in particular, and this wasn't part of the question, but I'll add it for Megan and Tiff, when you're buying, if you're looking at new construction, do you still need a buyer's agent, or do you just go to the model home and talk to the the builder representative, and what's the difference? Maybe we'll touch on that first, and then Matt or Brenda can touch on London.
If you can do this one.
Yeah, sure. So the answer is yes. So that the person who works at the model.
We lost Tiff.
Uh-oh. Do we lose Tiff?
Oh, yes, she is frozen. All right, well, good we got another realtor. Megan, you want to pick that up?
Sure. Can
Back it up.
somebody on the chat reply? Can you guys hear us?
I can hear
Yes,
you, Megan.
yes.
Well, can the attendees hear us? Can somebody?
Absolutely. New home communities.
Tiff,
Oh,
Yeah.
she's there.
Okay.
We're there for you. And
we got bad news. We lost you at the very beginning. You got to start over.
Well, we lost her again, unfortunately.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll start with what I'm sure she was going to say. The new home builder works for the builder. So, excuse me, the sales manager, the rep, when you walk into a beautiful new community and they say, look at all these homes you can buy, you can upgrade this and this, that person works for the builder. You will literally have to sign a contract that acknowledges that they do not work for you. They work for the builder. So it's the same thing as having a buyer's agent going into a resale home. You need a buyer's agent going in. The next question that we get a lot is, will I save money then? If I'm gonna, won't they give me a discount if I don't have a buyer's agent? Won't I get like 3% less off the house? Absolutely not. Builders don't discount their homes that way because then the next one won't appraise. So that is just not true. You won't save money on it that way. And they actually build in realtor fees to the price of their homes. They expect that. They want it because they don't want to have to represent you. They want you to be represented. They want to work with us because we do this for a living. So we will get it done for you. But yes, building, you absolutely need a realtor. I think Tiff's back. I'm going to let her finish. Keep going.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry. I tried to pick up what I was pretty darn sure you were going to say.
Yeah. So did you hear nothing that I said?
No,
Nothing.
Nothing. None of it.
Don't be a realtor.
Yeah. So yeah, just like what Megan said, it's the same as the yard sign out in front of the house. The person who works at the model home represents that seller. So I'm sure Megan hit on that, but I mean, there's all sorts of things that they will not tell you. The model home representative, that sales representative, one would be, you are allowed to get your independent inspections during different processes of that build, which only protects you. And these are things that we help you with, we encourage, we do every day. So there's lots of things, but the short answer is yes, you really need representation for new construction.
And it's the same answer as the first one I asked you, Tiff, which is it doesn't cost anything more or less to have your own buyer's agent.
Well, it will save you money, actually. So it doesn't, it's actually going to put more money in your pocket, really.
Right. Okay. And then Matt, from a lending perspective, if you're going into a major builder and a community and buying one of their houses, does that change anything with the lending? Do you still get pre-approved beforehand?
Yeah,
Talk to me about that.
It does. So typically when you're dealing with a builder, you might have two different situations. You might have a new construction, a loan that, a house that's about to be finished or is finished and is for sale. That's just like any other house, except instead of buying it from a private seller, you're buying it from a builder, and it's very similar. Now, the one good thing there is when a builder, is selling you that house, when we get the inspection back, this makes it a little bit easier because the implied thing from the builder is anything that's wrong with the house that the inspector finds, he's gonna fix it because he just built the house. Right. So the other scenario is when you're, having a custom home done, or you're buying a lot and you're doing a construction loan or buying in a neighborhood. Typically there, you're putting a deposit down on that property, and that oftentimes is a non-refundable deposit, and you're buying that house that's going to be completed 9 months later, and then you're going to get your permanent loan. So it is a little bit different. It's for that reason that it is, it's, you know, the people that buy new construction tend not to be first-time home buyers. That tends to be those second and third houses, just because it's a little bit more complicated. But, you know, we help walk people through any of those situations.
But if you're going to go into a new home community and choose your floor plan and your colors and your options and such, and the house isn't going to be ready for 6 to 9 months, even though you're not going to get the loan until then, the builder still requires, Tiff and Megan, they still require that client, that buyer, to be pre-approved on the front end before they start building. And then,
Absolutely.
and then we as the lender just refresh that approval and close the loan when the house is ready. That's your
Yes.
normal experience, right?
That is exactly right.
Okay. So really the story on that is, if you're buying an existing home or you're buying new, the process doesn't necessarily change. You still have your own buyer's agent. You still get pre-approved beforehand, and you still go through the same process. It's just that you have this 6 to 9 month pause while you're building it. Other than that, it's mostly the same in terms of the overall process.
Can I quickly address this question that came up? We got a question right there I can knock out really quickly.
Yes,
How
please.
long do we have to be employed by the same employer to purchase the first home? It's a really great question. When we're getting a credit application for a mortgage, we have to get a 2-year history. So it is not uncommon, and I think we have probably 2 to 5 transactions right now where we are underwriting the loan based on an offer letter because they haven't started the new job yet. We're waiting for that first paycheck to come in for them to get their down payment. Every situation is different, but you do, I mean, work history is dependent on a couple different things. I mean, how flexible your work history is and what it is, but every situation is different. You do not have to work for the same company for 2 years in order to qualify for a mortgage loan, as is evidenced by the fact that you can start your job tomorrow and we can get you that mortgage loan, you know, based on the offer letter under certain scenarios. So that's when you need to come see us and we'll talk about your situation specifically. Once again, another kind of myth that's out there. People think, I've got to be employed by that same employer for a long time.
Right.
Oh, and then
Great point.
You come out of college, you get your first job. We can, you know, let's say you graduate college with an accounting degree, get a job at Accenture, and you're working, you get your paycheck. Hey, we're ready to go. You're ready to buy a house. That's qualifying right there.
So let me get this straight. I think what I'm hearing you say is, if you think you want to buy a house and you have an income, or an offer to get an income, you should talk to us and we'll tell you exactly what you qualify for and when.
Correct. You can buy a house.
Right. Okay, terrific. Everyone, we're getting near the end. Any of our panelists feel that we didn't cover something that was important? I know this format's a little different. We don't have everybody live, you know, asking. So do you feel like something got missed? And also for our attendees, if you have had a question you felt like wasn't answered, real quick, go ahead and put it in and we'll try and answer it. And if we don't get to it now, we'll follow up with you individually afterwards to make sure that we answer that. Did we miss anything that you think everyone needs to know?
So I'm going to just say, you know, I would do your research. Obviously you guys are listening, so you are interested in this process, but do your research with who you work with. Zillow reviews, call us up, interview us. You know, I think it's really important. It's a wonderful process. It is fun and it's rewarding, but it's a big deal. And so I think that you need to do your due diligence on that.
And everyone knows somebody that's a realtor, knows someone that knows someone. You know, cousin Betty Sue just got licensed last week. Why is it important? I'm going to give you an opportunity for just a complete plug here. Why is it important to choose a realtor like you and Megan on the Andy Bovender team? What sets your experience and the service that you offer apart from every other realtor in town?
Okay, I'll start and then M2 will go after me. But I'm going to say transactional experience. We've got it. Not only do we work with buyers, but we also work with sellers every day, full time. I mean, you wouldn't go to a dentist who works part time, you know? And so we have that transactional experience. Every time you're doing a transaction, you're learning. We know we have tons of experience and we know all the other agents out there. I mean, plenty of times when we're in a multiple offer situation, we will win the deal just by our reputation. They know that we are bringing a quality client with a quality lender, and it's going to be a smooth transaction. So I guess that's my main points, is just that we know what we're doing. And you know, I'm telling you, it is fun. I mean, it's great. It's exciting. There's nothing better than closing on your first home and owning a piece of, like, this is your life. It's wonderful. I can go on and on. Go ahead, Megan.
No, I agree. I think it's such an important decision, and your realtor is your partner in this from the very beginning. And that was when Daniel asked if there's anything that we didn't touch on. That's what I was going to say, is start this relationship sooner rather than later, because there's no pressure. There's no timeline that you have to be on, but start the relationship so that you kind of we get to know you and what you're looking for and how to best serve you. Because, you know, there may be that one that shows up and we're like, oh my gosh, this is Tara's house. And we've been waiting for this one to come.
Right.
And this one is 30,000 under market value, and she's going to want to break her lease for this. But I have to know what you're looking for before I can make that phone call and be able to flag that for you. So I think to Tiff's point, we know what we're doing. We're on the largest team, not the largest by size, but actually the largest by transactions and volume. So the number one team, if you will, in the number one firm in all of the Carolinas. So we have, and when I say team, that doesn't just mean me and Tiff and a bunch of other realtors. We have a team of people that all work for you and with you. We have people that their whole job is to make your closing process as smooth and successful as possible. We partner with True Loan and with these guys to make sure that we do close. There are no issues in any step. So it's important picking somebody that you like and trust and get along with, and you think is going to hear you. A lot of the time hear what you're saying, but then hear what you're not saying too. I think it's really important to partner with somebody that you want there with you throughout this whole process. Right.
And sometimes that process is 30 to 60 days. Sometimes it's 18 months.
Yep.
Nobody on this call should feel like you shouldn't reach out to all of us now if you're thinking of buying a year or 18 months from now, because it's really important that you start figuring out what you're looking for. And to the point that Megan said, you know, if they know what you're looking for, they'll put you on a drip for the right neighborhoods based on what you can afford, you know, that's in your budget. And you just never know. You might end up seeing the exact perfect house 4 months from now, and your plan was a year from now, and that works out. You might think you're going to find it in 4 months, and it might be 12 months, and that's okay. There's no pressure one way or the other. We want to make sure you're getting, you know, what you need to have on your timeline, and we'll partner with you the whole time. I'm just going to turn around here and show you, if you can see the sign behind me, this is our lobby of our office. You know, True Loan Mortgage, we create the lending experience you'll love. And that's our commitment to you. That's our commitment to Tiff and Josh and Megan and to everybody involved in the process. That's why we're doing this, is we enjoy what we're doing. You can probably tell there's a lot of passion with our panelists. We appreciate each and every one of them for, you know, spending their time with all of us here tonight. I'm going to share my screen again in conclusion, because I got a couple of things I want to conclude with. Let me share this. Go back to, here we go. So when you started this journey for this call tonight, you saw that we were offering some pre-approval incentives, and one of the chat questions was, now how do I get that free appraisal? So let me tell you. So for everyone here, if you contact us and obtain a pre-approval, whenever you do it, forever in the future, you mentioned that you attended this event, we're going to give you a $50 gift card to Legion Brewing. However, in that email that you're going to get tonight, that has the download for the booklet. It's also going to have a little 3-minute video about True Loan Mortgage. I encourage you to look at, just to get to know a little bit more about us. I encourage you to go visit our website and spend some time reading the customer reviews that we have. But if you decide that you want to proceed and get a pre-approval sooner than later, which we encourage you to do, there's going to be a little link in there where you can go and look at our calendar and self-select your time, whether it's next week or 3 weeks from now. It's available. You just choose a time that's convenient for you. We do those pre-approval meetings in person or with Zoom. We're doing a lot of those right now. And if you come into the office, we're following all the social distancing practices and that and such. But if you, by Monday, select your time to go through that process to start your journey into homeownership and get pre-approved, then whether you find a house next month or next year, we will also cover the cost of your appraisal up to $500. So it is a significant savings. We just want to partner with you at the beginning of your journey, and we encourage you to get started now. And if you have any friends or family that you think would be interested, we'll extend an offer to them as well. You just need to let us know. So I just want to thank Tiff and Josh and Megan, as well as Matt and Brenda for attending. And most importantly, I want to thank all of you for spending an hour and a half of your evening with us to begin your homeownership journey. Thank you so much.
Daniel,
Thank you.
Yes.
I was going to say, Tiff, I'm going to just drop my cell phone in this chat box just so that you guys all have it. And Tiff, if you want to do the same, you guys save our number, give us a call, text us anytime, and we can kind of start chatting. But we're not going to send you a fancy calendar. So
But there are contact information and profiles in one of the download booklets that we're sending you as well. So you'll have everybody's contact info there as well. I'll leave this open so that everyone can get those numbers in that chat box. Did I hear Matt?
While we're doing that, Danny, can I just go through some of these questions and maybe knock out a few?
Yeah. Do we have some more to come up? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Anyone who wants to say, we'll cover them. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we feel about Kannapolis? Not lots of new construction, affordable. Kannapolis is blowing up just like everything near Charlotte. Everybody feels great about Kannapolis. What about working freelance? Is it going to be more difficult to qualify? Yeah, sometimes it is, but it's more and more easy every day in this gig economy that we're working in. You know, you need to know the rules. Come in, let's talk about it. Let's see what your situation is and what the plan needs to be. I've only been working in the U.S. since March 2019 because prior to that I was living and working in Brazil. Do I need to have 2 years of employment history within the U.S. to be able to qualify for a loan? Listen, we did a loan. No is the answer to that. We did a loan for a borrower this past year. It was Brenda and I both attended the closings. Brenda and I both were there. I mean, tears were shed. It was a great day. It was a fantastic closing. For him to be able to buy a house here was a lifelong dream, and it was a great day with their family. Yeah, come see us and talk about it. Yes, you can buy a house. Let's see.
You're in questions, Matt. There's one that just popped up in the chat. How much should we bring to the table for earnest money to be considered seriously?
That's a tip.
Yes, that's
yeah,
a tip.
and Megan,
that's a
what's
real
the
estate
answer?
For Megan. Yes.
Yeah.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Typically, in North Carolina, earnest money and due diligence money is about 1% of your offer price. So.
All right, about 1%. About 1% is what we heard. Anything else?
Megan, can you talk real quickly about the difference between due diligence and deposit?
And earnest money.
Yeah.
I can, but I'm not going to.
Okay.
It's complicated.
Too complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Right now,
You're right.
but basically, it's kind of it's a down payment that will put a check once you are under contract on a house. So you made an offer, they accepted it. There's about that 1% that Tiff is talking about of the purchase price. So $300,000 house, about $3,000 you put down within a few days of going under contract. And that money goes towards the purchase of the house, but that's kind of your stake in the game. So we could talk about all the details of kind of how we break that up and how it works once you get there. But just know that that's a little down payment that's kind of due in the beginning.
All right.
We got
Again,
another question. How
oh,
many
we do.
years do you go back to look at tax returns? Listen, if you're a W-2 wage earner, we're not going to look at tax returns in most cases. If you are
All
self-employed,
cases.
we're going to look at usually 1 year tax return. Depends on the situation, how long you've been in business. It could be 2 years tax returns. Everybody's situation is different. Come see us. Sorry, I say that a lot. Everybody's situation is different, but the reality is everybody's situation.
Everybody's situation is
Yeah.
different. Every single
what
one
we
of
say.
them. Yeah. So we look forward to meeting each and every one of you and continuing to answer your questions on an individual basis. Feel free with the email you get. You should probably be getting right now. You can respond with additional questions and we'll get in touch and answer them. Okay. So thank you
We're
all.
excited about
Thank
meeting
you so much.
everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.